Hey everybody, welcome back to another Q&A. It is September 16th, 2024. So I had posted this up this morning. We already have some questions waiting, so I'm going to go ahead and jump on this. First one is, do you refrigerate your almond butter or nut butters? I generally do, but that's because I'm more or less going to stick to things that are just the single ingredient or maybe some added salt to it. So like almonds, sea salt or salt. I mean, that's it. So you get that oil separation in the top. You're gonna mix that in, right? And then you'll put it in the refrigerator, and it will prevent that oil separation, but also it's probably going to extend the shelf life a little bit, reduce the risk of rancidity of the oil. Also, the natural versions might have a little bit higher susceptibility of like bacteria growing or mold, things like that. The oils and additional additives in a lot of the other store-bought oils will prevent a lot of that, so they don't necessarily need to be refrigerated, probably, but a lot of people are buying the natural versions, like the stir versions where you have to stir it up. I would probably store them in the refrigerator. If you go through them really quick, probably doesn't matter, but it's a good practice. What labs would you ask for to see all markers, including minerals, thyroid, etc.? So if you're looking for pretty comprehensive labs, first thing I would want to know is what's the goal of the labs, right? It sounds like you're just kind of asking for like a broad recommendation. So we'll break that down a little bit. Again, this is not going to apply to everyone, but it'll apply to a lot of people if maybe they have no baseline and they don't know what they're looking for. Things we would look at would be CBC, which would be your complete blood count, CMP, which is your complete metabolic panel, or thyroid. So that would be TSH, free T4, free T3, probably a reverse T3. You can get the totals in there if you want. Yes, no, doesn't really matter too much as long as you get the free level. If you want to go the extra step, you could add a thyroid antibody panel. Again, kind of just depends. Testosterone total and free, I generally will get both. Estradiol, progesterone, especially if you're a female, making sure you're taking that stuff at the right time of the month. DHEA, DHEA sulfate specifically isn't a bad idea. You can also get vitamin D 25 hydroxy. Again, if you're checking those things, not a bad idea. I'm probably going to forget things. I look at hundreds of sets of labs, but I'm probably going to blank out a little bit on what to recommend. Other things, cortisol doesn't hurt to have. Of course, we're getting an AM cortisol. I'm probably going to suggest getting that done within a couple hours of waking, so we're trying to see some of that morning waking response that we're going to get. You start doing that too late, it's going to drop, and you're not really going to have anything very accurate there. And it's still only a glimpse. It's definitely not going to be as accurate as getting a 4-point done or something like a salivary 4-point test or something, or urinary even. It's something. It's not useless. It is at least helpful. You can get a CRP. A lot of people opt for the high sensitivity version if you want to look into that inflammatory marker a little bit more. Granted, that's broad, so it's not going to see all inflammation, but it will see some of it. So that would be like a very basic lab that you would probably get done for just kind of general purposes. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can add. Now, you had asked about minerals or nutrients. So within the basic labs, one of the things that you really want to do is get good at reading a CBC. That's going to tell you a lot. Also, you could add a homocysteine in there too. That's a pretty good marker for B vitamin deficiency. But if you get good at reading a CBC, you can, and CMP, I mean, you can look at things like alkaline phosphatase and RBCs and the different size metrics of the RBCs, like your MCV and RDW and those things, and that's really helpful. So that can help with presenting things like zinc deficiency, magnesium, folate, B12, iron potentially. I mean, you can add an iron ferritin, iron binding in there as well. But you can get a lot out of a CBC panel and a CMP panel if you know what you're looking at. That's why these panels, some of these pre-made panels like Life Extension, Weight Loss Panel, they have the comprehensive and the basic. That's why they're so popular, is because they have like all this stuff in there that I'm talking about. But there are some more specialized markers that we can add for people, and that I might add for people. There's a lot of them, but those would be some basic ones for maybe someone that is just wanting to figure out where to start. Next question. OPD podcast about volume. I'm assuming this other question is pertaining to that. We had done a couple training specific podcasts, especially with Dr. Soko. Check those out. They're really good. Maybe biased, but I thought they were good. And we talked about volume and some different things in those and parameters and whatever research and practical application and all that. So he asks, have you experienced clients reducing their sets with better gains? Really broad question, but yeah, I mean, of course. So the problem with this question is there's a lot of things that go into that total recovery capacity. So we're going to use that word, recovery capacity. So if we think of recovery as a few variables, so we have like nervous system side, right? And stress and accumulation of that. So sleep, job, relationships, family, work, getting stuck in traffic, your mental state. I mean, like there's a lot of things that can accumulate stress that are outside of training, and then you add that sympathetic response of training in there, and all of these things accumulate. So that's going to look vastly different from person to person, and everyone's ability to handle those things is going to be a lot different as well. Secondly is more on the side of muscular recovery. So we had talked about in there, and Dr. Soko had talked about the idea of obviously training breaking down muscle tissue, and then us needing to repair muscle tissue, like eating our protein in adequate time. There's a balance of that, right? So more muscle protein breakdown is going to have a higher requirement for recovery. You're only going to achieve that so quickly. So if you're creating more muscle breakdown than you can recover from, or you're kind of like in a net loss at that point. It's not that you're going to lose muscle necessarily, but you're probably not going to gain it either, or at least not very well, if the repair is not surpassing the demand. There's definitely a lot of instances where people do less and recover better, but usually it's more so because the stress that is reduced that's really going to be the driver of that. It's probably going to yield better performance because they're able to put more into the sessions because their nervous system's functioning better. It's probably going to just yield a lower stress load in general. Recovery needs to be looked at as like a giant pie chart, and you have all these slices of the pie. This is how I kind of tell people to view stress. People use like that bucket, right? You don't want to overfill the bucket. You can also look at it as a pie chart. You have all these slices. You don't want to overfill that. Now, there's not a formula for that, of course, but definitely instances where people do less and get more, if that makes sense. More equals more until it doesn't, and then less probably equals more. When working on GI health, what day of eating would reflect your BM to pair Bristol? I'm not sure what they mean. If they mean like if someone's rotating like a training day, non-training day, or carb cycling or calorie cycling or something like that, I'm not sure if that's what that means. Well, let's take it as that. So you can have different stool consistency and frequency based on nutrition. And in fact, if you're looking at something like a GI map, you could have a healthy GI tract with different types of dieting or different types of nutrition modalities. But if you do something now and then completely change it and then do that for 4 weeks, you're probably going to get a different result. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that basically everything alters microbiome to some extent, and that would happen day to day to an extent, so you can see differences in bowel movement. Now, what I'll say about this is if you're trying to just get an idea of do you have normal bowels in terms of this Bristol stool, I would pretty much look at like what is the most common thing you're doing day to day. So if you have a free meal on one day, or you're doing like a high carb day or a whatever, but all the other days are pretty similar, those are probably going to be your general average, and that would be what we would want to look at for that Bristol stool. If you are doing one of those high days or the free meals or something and it's completely wrecking your digestion, yeah, that's not really reflective of all of the other days, which are your general average, but still not good, right? You could say like, well, I'm only having this one day a week because I eat a large pizza on Saturdays and I crap my brains out on Sundays. I'm like, well, I still wouldn't do that. It's still, because then it's probably taking a couple days for everything to regulate, and that in and of itself is telling you it's like your GI tract doesn't really like that. So even if you're not eating the same things every day or you don't have the same calories every day, you should have pretty similar consistency, but acute variables can change it, sleep, stress. But I would say, like, look at what you're doing most often and look at the Bristol stool from that, and that's going to be your baseline. I think we have one more here. Are GLP-1s the future of bodybuilding? Seen bodybuilders utilize with success. GLP-1s are probably more widely used outside of bodybuilding. I have no stats to back this up. I'm just saying based on the widespread availability of them and how like every clinic and place that offers Botox is giving people GLP-1s now. I would say they're probably everywhere, and applications really everything. Are there instances where applying a GLP-1 could be beneficial? Yes. Are they pretty limited? In my opinion, yes. I think there's limited use for them. I think dose is a huge thing as well. Understanding that the mechanisms that make them work and how, slowing the way that they slow motility and things. I mean, that in and of itself can be problematic when it happens too much. It can be beneficial, but too high of a dose, that's probably going to be an issue. So dose and application are going to be huge. Is it the future of bodybuilding? I don't know. That seems like a pretty grand statement, but I think that right now, currently, they are doing more harm than good. That is not to say that there aren't some people understanding how to utilize them correctly and potentially benefit from them. But as a whole, they are definitely being utilized pretty poorly. Probably incorrect dosing and incorrect, demographics. So that's just my opinion, and that's just observational data that I have from, looking around, talking to other coaches, the coaches I work with, the cases that are coming into me, the cases that are coming into them, the consultations I'm doing, and all that. They aren't doing well. They're doing more harm than they are doing good currently. But they could be great, or they could be at least good or helpful. It's just a tool. Just like anything else, it is just a tool. When utilized correctly, could have some merit. I don't think it's miraculous personally, but currently it's not great. So hopefully that's helpful. I will talk to you guys next time.